What's going on, everybody? It's the Godless Guide, and I am so excited that you found my YouTube channel where I show you how messed up the Bible is using the Bible. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a former pastor. I grew up in the church my entire life. I worked in church leadership for over a decade. I'm a Bible scholar. I have an advanced degree in biblical theology. I know biblical Greek, biblical Hebrew, and today I'm an atheist that speaks out against the church and the toxic beliefs that come from the church. Now, I got my start not here on YouTube, but on TikTok. So if you're not following me on TikTok, go check me out. I have 325,000 followers, and I tend to make smaller content videos, normally 15 seconds to about a minute. But a lot of people started asking me to make longer form videos where I can really dive into what the Bible actually says. Because for many of us that grew up in the church, we realize that what we were told that's actually in the Bible is not in the Bible. And what we were told to think and believe actually isn't a way of showing faith and kindness and love. It was a way to control us, to get us to do what the church or our parents wanted us to do. So I've created this YouTube channel to actually break down what the Bible says. And I like to take Bible stories that everyone knows, everyone loves, and break them down to show you how absolutely horrific they are and how they probably shouldn't be taught to children. So today we are talking about the story of the Garden of Eden, where we see Adam and Eve and the punishment that they receive from eating from the tree of knowledge. So if you don't know that story, that's okay. I'm going to break it down for you real quick. And then we are going to dive into that story to show you how completely psychotic and unhinged God seems to be. So let's get right into it. For those of you who don't know about the Garden of Eden, there is Adam and Eve, the first man and first woman. They're in this garden. God comes to them and says, listen, you can eat whatever you want. You just can't eat from this one tree. For if you eat of the tree of knowledge, you're going to die. In that day, you're going to die. So Adam and Eve are walking around the garden, and this serpent comes out. The serpent, the deceiver, people who claim is the devil. And the serpent says, hey, actually, you're not going to die. You're just going to know what's good and what's evil. And so what does Adam and Eve do? They eat of the tree. And what happens? Well, they don't die. God kicks them out. And not only does God kick them out, but God says, because you disobeyed me, because you ate of this tree, then Eve, your labor pains are going to be incredibly painful. And also, Adam, you're going to go around and you're going to struggle for the rest of your life. So when I was a kid, I was like, oh, yeah, it's kind of a cool Bible story. But as I went through my faith deconstruction, I saw how absolutely horrific that story is. So let's dive right into it. We're going to start in Genesis 2:16, where God gives Adam one rule in this garden. And let's read from it. God says, you may freely eat of every tree in the garden, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in that day that you eat of it, you will die. And as someone who has deconstructed their faith, my question is, right away, red flag, what is it about knowledge that scares God? Why would it be a bad thing for Adam and Eve to know the difference between good and evil? Also, if Adam and Eve lack moral awareness, if they cannot understand that eating from this tree is a bad thing, if they don't know good and evil, then how can you punish them? They don't know good and evil. How can you do that? So we also have to notice that God, right here in Genesis 2:17, is actually the first person to lie. Because God says that in that day that you eat from the tree, you will die. If you look at the Hebrew, the word of you will die is not you're going to die in a month, in a year, you're not going to live out a lifetime. It says in that day you shall die. So basically, Adam and Eve should eat of the fruit, and the next thing that happens in that day, they shall die. But as I've told you, they don't die. Adam actually goes on to live for 930 years. So the first lie in this whole Bible is actually God. And it's actually God using a scare tactic on Adam and Eve. And so what we see here is that it's actually the serpent, the deceiver in this story, or who's been named the deceiver, is actually the one that tells the truth. In Genesis 3:7, it says that the serpent tells them, the serpent tells them that, hey, you're not going to die. Your eyes are actually going to be opened. And we see in Genesis 3:7 that it says, then the eyes of both were open when they ate of it, and they knew they were naked. So notice here that their eyes were open and then they knew that they were naked. So this means that before Adam and Eve disobeyed God, they lacked moral awareness. They didn't have the ability to discern what's right and what's wrong, because the knowledge that they gained from the tree taught them what was right and what was wrong. Before they ate, they didn't know. So this would be very similar to me as a parent. If I want my kids to behave in a certain way, if I say, listen, I want you to do this, but if I don't teach them what I actually want from them, then if they don't do what I want, that's not on them. A small little thing is, if there is a specific way that I want the boys to clean their bathroom, if say, hey, this is what you need to do to clean the bathroom, if I don't show them that, if I don't give them the knowledge of what I want them to do, then when they behave in a way that doesn't match that knowledge, then that's not on them. It's not their mistake. They're doing what they know how to do, what they were created to do. It's actually my job as a parent to teach them that. The blame is on me. It's not on my kids. In the same way, in the story, the test that God gave to Adam and Eve was completely rigged. They didn't know right and wrong. And so being told not to do something because they didn't have that knowledge, that's not on them. That's actually on God. And here's the uncomfortable part about this story for a lot of Christians, is that God was hiding the truth from Adam and Eve. The serpent was the one, and we see in Genesis 3, verses 4 and 5, that the serpent says to Adam and Eve, you will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. The uncomfortable part for a lot of Christians is that the serpent was right. God said, you eat of this tree, you're going to die. The serpent says, you eat of this tree, you're going to know right and wrong. Well, guess what happened? They ate of the tree and they knew right from wrong. So who's at fault there? The deceiver, the one who is claimed to be the deceiver in so many Christian traditions, actually told the truth. But the God of truth, the God of compassion, the God of love, actually was the liar. And if you think about this, let's look at God's reaction. So after Adam and Eve acted in a way that was not appeasing to God, God's immediate response wasn't to teach them, it wasn't to guide them, it wasn't to show them compassion. It's actually God hid from them. God's first response in all of this is not to come down with love and kindness and instruction. It's actually to withdraw. God's response was to withdraw. And for many of us, a parent withdrawing is actually emotional abuse. It's emotional abuse when a parent says, you know what, I'm not going to talk to you, I'm not going to speak to you. That, by definition of most psychology, is emotional abuse. And then God says that once God reveals God's self to Adam and Eve, God curses Eve with pain in childbirth. And that's Genesis 3:16. God curses Adam with a lifetime of toil in Genesis 3:17 to 19. God curses the ground himself and exiles both of them from paradise. And why does he do this? He's afraid that they'll eat of the tree of knowledge and be able to live forever. Y'all, one of the things that I've learned as a parent, one of the things that has been the most challenging to learn as a parent, is how to give out just punishments. If my son is late. I'm very strict on, you need to be home at this time. If he arrives home at 10:02 and my response is to burn down the house, that is not a just punishment. That is an overreaction. That shows nothing about my son. That shows my insecurities. And God's response to not only give Eve pain and childbirth, to curse Adam with a lifetime of toil, to curse the ground itself, and to kick them out of paradise for eating from the tree of knowledge is amazing. It is such an overreaction. It shows such a volatile and a narcissistic God that he would not want his own creation to know good from evil. You see, the punishment doesn't fit the crime in any of this. If a parent decided to ground their child for 930 years because they ate one cookie, you would call that abuse. You would not call that discipline. But for some reason, we as society, because this book has been told to us, oh, this is holy, this is God's work, we see it as this loving God. We see it as this, oh, well, that's a divine judgment, where it is absolutely not. And here's the irony in all of this, is that knowledge, the desire for knowledge, became the biggest sin in the Garden of Eden. The tragic thing that made them fail was not them, overusing the land or being mean to one another or being unkind. Their biggest sin that Adam and Eve did in all of this was gaining knowledge. And that should be absolutely terrifying, because gaining knowledge means that Adam and Eve could be independent thinkers, that they could question authority, that they could use critical thinking. That's what God is afraid of in all of this, is that Adam and Eve can think for themselves, that they can critically process information. This God that's all loving and all powerful and all caring is terrified that something could have knowledge. And that's what is so toxic about this story. That is why this story should not be taught to kids, because kids need to know that questioning authority and critical thinking is something that is very important. So when Christians say, and they make claims that God is all just and God is all loving, we can go back to Genesis and see the first interaction with humankind is not God being all just or all loving. It's God being a jerk. It's God being a narcissist. It's God being afraid of knowledge. The serpent didn't cause Adam and Eve to fail. The serpent started an evolution, the birth of critical thinking. And ironically, that's what Christianity fears the most. So I want to thank you for joining me for this video. If you are interested in this type of stuff, if you're interested in faith deconstruction, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure you follow me on TikTok at The Godless Guide, where I try to put out daily content. And my goal here for this YouTube page is I'll probably be putting out a long form video. I'm going to try putting it out on Sunday, just kind of ironic every week because I used to preach on Sunday. And so my videos will come out on Sunday. I will also be putting out reels and shorts throughout the week. So I hope you found this engaging. I hope you found this interesting. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I will talk with you all later.